Доброго дня, доброго сонячного дня, шановні колеги, гості нашого вебінару. Сьогодні ми з вами знаходимося вдома, але продовжуємо працювати, і видавництво Macmillan продовжує працювати разом з вами та переживати за наших студентів, за учнів, особливо за старшокласників. Тому ж сьогодні тема нашого вебінару – це підручник, бестселер, це зустріч з автором цього підручника, який вже дуже багато вчителів використовують як основний підручник в 10-11 класах. І за їхніми відгуками результати ЗНО їх учнів значно кращі, аніж були до використання саме цього підручника. Тож швидко структура, з чого складається. 8 тематичних розділів у кожній книзі і 2 рівня складності вправ. Це допомагає успішно скласти екзамен всім учням, навіть якщо вони не вивчали англійську поглиблено. 2 рівні складності вправ, 12 уроків у розділі для рівня B1, 16 уроків у розділі для рівня B2. Також ми можемо знайти тут тести до кожного розділу, 2 рівні та 2 варіанти тестів. Та ключі до тестів має лише вчитель. Швидко про структуру кожного юнита. Ідеальне рішення для учнів з різними рівнями – це надасть їм впевненості в своїх силах та допоможе здати ЗНО успішно. І, що саме головне, це підручник дає навчання екзаменаційним стратегіям. Тобто ми бачимо, що exam skills із корисними порадами саме для учнів. Тож, не буду забирати ваш час. And now I will give the floor to our speaker today. This is Jacek Łagun, one of the authors of this bestseller. So you are welcome, Jacek.
Hello. Thank you. Okay, let's try. Let's have a rehearsal once again. I think. Yeah, dogs are very nice. And cats, yeah, they listen patiently. Now, one more question. Who was the best teacher you've ever had? Now, was it your English teacher? If that was your English teacher, yes, it was your English teacher, okay? So isn't it surprising that you are English teachers, you know, because your first English teacher was the best teacher you've ever had. Now, why am I asking you personal questions? Now, I hope that right now, when you're writing this, you're smiling and you're quite happy and you're thinking, wow, these are nice places, these are nice people, this is nice experience. You know, the thing is that when we think, when we learn, when you get ready for something, we, in a natural way, our attention is drawn to emotive subjects. So basically, if you're listening or you're talking about something that's emotionally involving, you're more moved to it. You know, if something is personal to you, you get involved in that. There's one more thing I'd like to mention before moving on with this webinar. That is, you know, levels of processing theory. That is, in 1972, Craig and Lockhart, you know, they had this research, and in this research they noticed that while learning, you know, there are different levels of processing the language or the information. The structural, that is the spelling, so basically when you see the word, phonemic, or when you see and hear, or you hear the word, and there's the semantic level, when you work with the meaning of the word, with what's behind it, not only the way it looks and the way it sounds. So the thing is that, you know, whenever you want to learn and you want your students to remember, you have to make them process the word deeply. So you want to get your students involved and you want your students to play with the word in lots of different ways. And this is how you make your students remember vocabulary better. And now, I will try today to talk to you about how to introduce and record vocabulary, how to use communicative drills, how to use students' lives-based activities and revisions to get, let's say, personal with your students, to make sure that they will work with the vocabulary they have in a personal way. I can see information that some people don't have sound. Okay. So now let's take a look then at the first point, that is introducing and recording the vocabulary. Okay, one of the first things you can try whenever you work with your students is whenever you introduce a new word or a new idea, you can tell your students, you get a set of vocabulary. You can tell your students, why don't you make the flower of your words? Okay, now the idea is, that you tell your students, for example, you write the word, in this case it's a dog, it's a simple word, but just to show you the idea, like the word dog, and then you ask your students to use the words, but not any words they find on the page, but the words that they find personal and the words that they find like in their life. The thing is that basically I would like my students to learn all the vocabulary I give them, and I would love my students to know everything, but the truth is they won't. Okay, is it the same with your students? Do they get a lot of words but learn only some? And I suppose it's a thing that happens to all of us. We have lots of words that we hear, but we use only the ones that we actually need. So if you give your student this topic of a dog, and then you give them lots of different adjectives, take a look, some of them are quite complex, connected with the dogs. Tell them, why don't you use only the ones that are connected with the dogs that you know, or the dog that you have, or the dog that you like. And if you take a look at this one and you see that this is like fun and spotted and curious and gentle and white and silly and black, you'll probably realize that the person who made this flower probably has a Dalmatian, right? So this is a dog from this person's perspective. You get personal and you learn the vocabulary you actually need. Okay, so this is one idea you can try with the students. Obviously, it can be a flower, it can be any other shape, but the point is you give them a simple word and ask them to use complex vocabulary to describe it from the personal experience. Now, another activity. You give your students a set of words, nice set of words. You ask them to add 2 more to each column. I believe it's a good idea, to ask your students to add more words, because they will ask you about the words that they actually need, of the words that they know, so they have a chance to show off with the knowledge. This is one thing. Another thing is you give your students a chance, to ask about the words that they know. But then it's a good thing to ask your students to categorize the vocabulary. Now, obviously, here you have some very natural categories: clothes, accessories, buttons, and materials, which is a good thing. But sometimes it's a good thing to make your students think about the vocabulary again from the personal perspective. And here comes something which I like to do with my students, and which I got from Dr. Śpiewak. You may have heard about him. You may have had seminars or webinars with him. And the idea is called Suitcase, Fridge, and Bin. And now you tell your students, look at the words you have here. Look at these words you can see, and I would like you to think about your life. And think about which words you need now, and then you take those words into your suitcase, so you divide them into the suitcase, and they can write this down, in the notebooks, like the suitcase words, and they have a list of words. And then, just like them, okay, now take a look. The fridge is the place where you put things that you may need later. So like food that you may need later. So you tell your students, now look at all the words you have here, and can you please put the words you've got on this list, those words that you maybe don't need now, maybe because it's summer, maybe because it's spring, but these words describe clothes for winter. But can you please put these words, and can you put them into the fridge? And then you tell them, there may be some words here that you basically don't need, you don't think you need at all. Can you please put these into the bin? And now, some students will probably think that, some teachers, will probably think that, what? You ask your students to say that they don't need some words? Well, the thing is that you want your students to think about the words. You want them to focus about that. And you know what? Probably the moment they put some words into this bin is the moment they learn the words. I don't know about you, but I think it's the same. But I remember some words in my career, in my teaching career, and my learning career as a language student. When I had some words to learn, and I looked at them, and I thought, like, wow, what a useless word. I'm never going to use it. It's a word like, for example, the word ambidextrous. Do you know the word ambidextrous? It means like you can use both hands equally well. You're not right-handed, you're not left-handed, right, left-handed, but you're just ambidextrous. And when I learned that word, I thought, like, what a useless word. There are no people like that. Okay, so just like, okay, but this is the moment I learned this word. A few years later, I was having a class with a student, and she was talking about her father, and she said, well, my dad is not right-handed, he's not left-handed, he's, and I went like, he's ambidextrous. Like, no, this teacher who knows everything. Okay, the teacher who basically, I know all the words in the world. I knew that. Please remember the word ambidextrous because it may be useful today. We'll see. Okay, so this is an idea, categorizing, but in a, let's say, non-obvious way. Okay? Now, another activity that I would like to suggest is I spy with my little eye. Obviously, you know the game, right? It's a good game for children, but not for teenagers. Well, why not? We're not going to play this easy, simple version with our students, but we can complicate it a little bit. And again, we can go for different categories, right? So let's take a look. You give your students very nice vocabulary, like words that they can use to talk about sports. You can discuss, which sports they have in Ukraine, which people do in Ukraine, which they don't, okay, personalizing that. But then you tell your students, okay, now let's go with this. I start with, I spy with my little eye, like this, a word with, and then you give them a challenge, but don't challenge them, again, the usual way. But why don't you go for something that you can expect may bring some problems? So, for example, I spy with my little eye a word with difficult spelling. And when you ask your students, to find this word, the word that you're thinking about, and when you say, okay, I think it's this word, or they say, I think it's that word, I'm like, fine, cool. So now, can you tell me why you think it's a difficult word? So now, you're my student, you're my class of 532 people. Wow, that's a nice class. Probably the biggest class I've ever taught. So now, what do you think the word with the most difficult spelling here on the list is? Oh, right, I can see the difficult spelling. Okay, so, and now, the good thing is that, when you look at that, you look from your own perspective. You're thinking what my idea is, but actually you'll be giving me the words that you think are difficult. And I will say, why do you think it's difficult? Okay, so here's my answer. Wait for it. And this is what I think is the word with the difficult. Because for me, like bungee, I never remember is it double E or is the IE. But the idea is that you make your students focus for a moment. Now, okay, let's try another one. I spy with my little eye a word with unusual pronunciation. So what would you put here? Okay, any ideas? And now it's a funny thing because your language is slightly different from mine. So probably, we may have different ideas, but oh yeah, everybody has got the same answer. Okay, yes, obviously this is yachting. My students will say something like yachting, because this is, because we have like this Polish word yacht. I don't know if it's the same in your language, but in Polish you say yacht. So this is why lots of students will have a problem with that. But again, we go through this I spy with my little eye a word, and then we go for something. Okay, just one more. So I spy with my little eye an activity for people who don't know what fear is. Okay, if you take a look here, again, you have to think from your perspective, you get personally involved, and okay, fine, I'll tell you. I put a word which is not here on the list, but I think this is for people who really know what fear, who don't know what fear is. Yeah, okay, good. You agree with me that teaching is for people. Now, some people think, yeah, teaching's so easy, anybody can do that. And say, yeah, fine, go into a classroom and talk to, 30 people, 25 people, 40 people, some of them don't want to listen to you. I think this is, like bungee jumping on a mountain bike. This is what basically I think teaching is, right? So basically, but no, the point I'm trying to make is that, you can ask your students to categorize things from different perspectives. And, it's up to you what categories you choose, just, you can go crazy with different words, you can It's like something you do every day, something you do only on Tuesday morning, something your mom would never do, something you can't buy, something that smells nice, something that is colorful. It's your decision. The point is, you want, yes, teaching is cool, I agree. The point is, you want your students to start thinking about the words from a little bit different perspective. And I hope you can see how little you have to prepare this exercise. It's an exercise in which students get involved and they work really, the brain's really hard, they work really hard. People, it gets personal, because you express your own opinion, so you get emotionally involved, but then you process the vocabulary really, really deeply. So it's not just like I have a word that I've seen and I have to learn, I have a list, I have to memorize and I go over and repeat the words, but I put those words in a certain context. When thinking about, the final exam, your students don't need to know all the words from the book. They never will, and that's what the truth is. But they need to know the words that are important for them personally, the words that they use to describe their own world. So, give them a chance to look at their own world and work with this vocabulary. Okay, one more idea of how to do that. Something that I call prove me wrong. You know the meme, right? Obviously. Okay. I'm sorry. So, prove me wrong. The idea is here that, you ask your students to choose a word and say that this is the best word for something. This is the best thing for some people. I'll give you examples in a moment. And then they present their argument why. And after those, they present it. Another student has like 15 seconds, maybe 20 seconds to either agree or, which is better, prove the person wrong and have some counter argument. So let's take a look at how it works. If you take a look at this prove me wrong activity, in exercise number 15, we have a few words, and your students, for example, in exercise number 15, they have to choose the best place for a very active person to work in. Okay, and then one student probably will talk about, the police station, because lots of things happen there, or maybe a travel agency because they have lots of customers. Maybe not right now, but they do. But they normally have a lot of customers. But the thing is that if we take a look at that, your students again they think and they argue and they say, well, no, it's not true. Active people, but it's not actually. We don't want them to be right or like give one correct answer, but we want them to discuss. We want them to agree or disagree, because this is the way to put those words in a personal world of theirs. Now, in exercise 16, you could ask for a place to work for somebody who likes to meet other people. Okay, and this could be a courier, it could be a dry cleaner, because people go and dog there, a solicitor because they meet like the judge and they meet the witnesses and everybody else. So basically, again, you ask your students to think. You ask your students to put these words in some categories from the personal perspective. Okay, there's one more thing that makes our personal life really personal. That is the way we experience the world. So why don't we use this in teaching? You can ask your students, obviously you can see the five senses, and you can tell your students, what? Now I'm going to give you a few words, and I'd like you to take a look at the words, and I would like you to make associations. So whenever I give you a word, I'd like you to decide what your first association is. Is it something you see, or is it something you hear, or is it something that you smell, or something that you can taste, or that's something that you touch? Your first thing, that first thing that comes to your mind. Again, take a look. You have to prepare nothing. You just get the book. You get the list of words you want to use, and then you ask your students. So I'll talk to you. I'll give you these words, and I'd like you to think, or you can write if you type quickly. You can write your association. So the third word I'd like you to think about is an egg. And I suppose that for some of you, it's going to be a touch, because they're like hard. For some of you, probably thinking about scrambled eggs, you'll think about taste, absolutely. For those of you who have some unfortunate experience with very old eggs, it may be the smell. and I hope you don't have this experience, but the idea is, that we see it from a different perspective. So you tell your students, okay, now the next word. This is going to be very easy. Oh, you can't choose a lot of sentences. You have to think about your first immediate choice. So, for example, coffee. Yeah, it's between smell and taste, right? For me, coffee is all about smell, and the best smell is when you open fresh coffee and you just take this deep whiff. It's wonderful. I love it. Taste is okay, but the smell is perfect. So you give your students a chance to discuss that. Okay, now something maybe you shouldn't discuss with your students, or maybe you should listen carefully what they say. Wine, and then if they talk about the taste, they shouldn't know it. They're too young. But wine is love, okay? And then you go with cheese. I hope it's not touch. It's not supposed to remember the touch of cheese. And finally, bread. For me, again, bread is all about smell. Just imagining an old house with my grandma, and this wonderful smell. You walk in and you can smell it's all the memories back. It's beautiful. But the thing is that some students will say it's the smell, some say it's the taste, and then you ask them to discuss that. Then you ask them to say why, tell a story that's behind that. Why do you think it's the taste? Why do you think it's the touch? Why do you think it's the sight? And again, we look at the words from a personal perspective. We look at the vocabulary from the perspective of your own life, your own experience. And this is what you need to know. You need to learn those words this way, because this is what we want to remember. Okay, do you remember the word ambidextrous? I hope you do, because today it's actually useful. It's not useless. Okay. Here's one more idea, one final idea for recording vocabulary, writing words down and practicing and introducing vocabulary. Something which I call an ambidextrous pen. I call it, because I'm actually very proud, because this is an activity I created myself. Anyway, okay, here is how it goes. Have you got a piece of paper and a pen in front of you? I hope you do, because you're supposed to be taking notes or something. Okay, fine. So now I'm going to demonstrate this ambidextrous pen to you. Now, the point behind this activity is, to make your students see all the letters in a word. Because quite often our students they don't pay attention. They just write anything, something that comes to the mind, and they just basically write whatever they have, right? And they will skip letters, they'll change other letters, and it's okay. That's fine. This is what actually should happen. This is the way our brains work. We don't pay attention to every letter. But, when preparing our students for the exams, we'd like them to learn the more difficult words. So from time to time, when you have some more difficult words you'd like your students to take a look at, you should try this activity. Okay, you tell your students, now, get a piece of paper, get a pen, and I'm going to spell a word to you. That's what I'm going to do to you in a moment. But every new letter you're going to write will have to be written with a different hand. So just, okay, found the pen. So you will write the first letter with your right or your left hand, depending which hand is dominant, and then you change, and then you write with the other hand, and this hand and that hand. So one letter at a time, okay? So yes, ambidextrous. So now I'm going to spell the word to you. People, you try it, how it works for you, and see if you will focus on every letter separately. Okay, here we go. E. Now, change your hand. X. Change your hand. T. Change your hand. O. Change your hand. A. Change your hand. C. Change your hand. U. Change your hand. O. Change your hand. O. Change your hand. I. Change your hand. C. Change your hand. U. Change your hand. L. Change your hand. A. Change your hand. and R. Some of you are writing, are typing at the same time as writing the word down. You're incredible. I couldn't do that. Or maybe you're not doing what I've asked you to do. Students. Okay, so the word is obviously extracurricular. That's the word you've got here with curricular activities. But the point is, good, yes. There's a challenge, absolutely, yes, there's a challenge. It's funny, and if you take a look at the way you've spelt it, some letters are in they don't look the way they should, but this is what makes them look different. This is what makes your students remember those words, those letters, and see that, oh, so in extracurricular we have 2 R's, or we have U, right? Because students will write anything. So basically the idea is that you make your students focus on what they are doing. You slow them down. It's also a very important thing sometimes for our students to do. And the word was extracurricular, right? So, and they have a moment of fun, but the thing is, you can't do it too often. With teenagers, if you give the same exercise many times, they go no, it's boring, we're doing it again. So do it from time to time. And choose only those words that your students will have problems with. Because we know, we're teachers, we've been there, we've done that, right? We have the experience. So what mistakes students may make, what words they may have problems with. So choose those words and work with these. So as you can see, we can get personal with our students. We can personalize the vocabulary before we actually even start working with it in a way, right? We can introduce the vocabulary at the very beginning with making it personal for our students. Now, the next thing I'd like to talk to you about is something which I call communicative drills. Something in which our students, again, they communicate, but they get the vocabulary they have and they work with this vocabulary again and again and again, and they just go over this vocabulary many times. Okay, and again, I'll try and show you and try to explain these to you. And I would like to say one thing, that is that I think I've said that, but I like exercises which don't necessitate that we don't have to have a lot of preparation for. Because, we're teachers, we're busy, we have some, free time and like to spend it for, our friends and the families, because we do have friends and families. Although our students are really surprised. I don't know if you've ever had that, that your students are surprised that you actually have a life. You say, I was at home, and my students go home? You have a home? It's yes, I do have a home, right? I'm a teacher, It's I was talking to my friend, and they go oh, you have friends, Yes, they are teachers too, right? So this is how we work, right? The only friends we have are teachers, no other friends. And we want to spend some time from time to time. So, but we need to prepare some exercises, and these exercises should be easy, and they should make our students work rather than us. Why? Well, because this is the way to get their brains involved. Okay, so let's take a look at a few suggestions for communicative exercises. Okay. Do you know the show, The Pyramid? It's I'm waiting for a yes, no, Y for yes, and N for no. Okay, good, nice. I'll talk to you about that. Okay, well, in this show, there are 2 people. One is sitting with the back to the board that you can see, or one can't see the board. And, basically, the other person can see the board, and they have to give a description of something. I'm sorry, a description of something, and thanks to this description, the student, the other person, has to guess what the word or the category or group is. So basically, when working in the classroom, quite often, if I want my students to go over some vocabulary, revise the vocabulary we've introduced, I play my classroom version of this game. So, for example, let's imagine you have a class on houses, and you have those different words. So what I do, I tell my students, why don't you now just sit, work in pairs. If there's an even number of people, then they work in a group of 3, and one of them is the one who describes the words, and the other one or the other 2 are the people who don't look at the board. Okay, so basically, I ask my students not to look at the board because there won't be any fun. And you know what? My students are cool people and they usually listen. They don't look. Do students in Ukraine wear hoodies a lot? Like, yeah, okay, fine. It's very useful. I mean, very useful for this exercise, because then, the ones who are not supposed to look at the board, they just like sit like this. They put the hoodies over their heads and they don't look at the board because the hoodies cover everything. So it's an idea that you can use with your students, right? So, and you will have this wonderful class, of half of them sitting with hoodies here, hiding, and the other one looking at the board. Just like make sure that your headmaster or headmistress doesn't come into the classroom, because then it will look very, very strange with students with the hoodies not looking at you or not looking at the board. But you tell your students, okay, so half of you look at the board, half of you don't, and then you, the teacher, you write one of the words, or actually not one, probably 3 words from the last class. You can use the word mansion, cottage, and terraced house. Okay. And then you tell the students, now you have 1 minute, the ones who are looking at the board, to describe these words so that the other person guesses. Obviously, they can't use the word. They can't use any word that sounds like that. They just have to use, they just have to describe it. So they just do it, describe it very quickly, 1 minute, and then they switch. And you have 2 or 3 different switches, and then you go over this vocabulary very, very quickly. Again, the point is, we're getting personal. You're describing these words from your own perspective. Sometimes you'll have students like, I have no idea what this is. So, well, then they lose points. But, no preparation. And again, some fun, and remember, give your students a time limit. They need to have a time limit, because in this time limit is something that will make your students focused on the task. With teenagers, if you tell them, now, you have 3 words, describe them, they will go like, well, and if they know that they have only like 30 seconds and they have only 1 minute, they will basically try and do it very, very quickly. Okay, so, and then they switch and they switch and they switch again. Now, another activity you can do with this one is, like, if your students are really good and those definitions are too easy, you can say something like this. Pick one of the words, but don't describe them, but give only 3 words that you associate with one of with the words on the board, and your students and the other student has to guess. So it's not like full definitions, but associations. It's like thinking about like semantic frames that they have in their heads. Now, for example, let's see which word I'm going to talk about. Village. Summer, and relaxation. See, cottage. I meant cottage, right? So this is the word that you will probably think about. So I gave you my idea, and then again you can ask the other person, why is it relaxation? Why is it summer? Why not in the winter? Because I have this picture of like a cottage in the summer. So 3 words only, and still building associations. It's more dynamic. It makes you think more. And a variation of an activity I've just shown you, right? So this is one more thing you can do with your students. Now, another activity that is the, well, odd word out, but in a new way, okay? So, we all know the activity, which is the odd word out, right? Your students have like 3 words, not just like 3 words, 2 of them belong to one group, 1 doesn't, okay? And I don't know if it has ever happened to you, but there's always a student or 2, or sometimes a whole class, which is, I think, quite great. A whole class of students, when you give them like the odd word out, they will find 1 word, and you said this is the odd word out, and they say, yeah, well, but if you look at that from a different perspective, if you think from like a different perspective, you can see that this works in a different group. And you can either be unhappy about those students who don't give you the answer from the key, or you can use them. You can tell the students the following thing. Now, my dear young people, you never call them children. When you call them children, they get really, really angry. Sorry, I have to I think I have to switch. Okay, I had to mute the phone. I'm sorry. So you tell your students now. Can you please create? Like an exercise with the odd word out? Okay. So they work. They have like those words, groups of 3 words or maybe 4 words. Depends on your choice. And then you tell them, okay, now. Exchange your words with the other group, and they have to find the odd word out. So far, so good. Like your students getting ready, creating their own odd word out. But after that, you tell them, okay, now you take a look at your friend's odd word out and try to show that they were not right. Try to show that the word that was the odd word out actually was not the odd word out. Find a situation in which all the 3 words belong together, or all the 3 words or some 2 other words can be described. For example, we have here the words, let's say, canteen, gymnasium, and the playground. Okay, so that's our set, canteen, gymnasium, and the playground. My intention is the playground because it's outside. And yes, the playground is outside, canteen and gymnasium are inside. But, if you give your students a challenge, try to find a reason why it's not a good example. They go like, oh, right, fine. For example, gymnasium and the playground are the place where people are active, and canteen is not. Or you can say canteen, gymnasium, and playground is a place where we can find lots of people. I don't know about your country, but I think everybody likes physical education. Everybody likes the breaks, and everybody likes food. So this is where you usually find students. So basically, the idea that you tell your students that try to switch things. Try to play with things. Try to manipulate somebody else's answers. So that you again make something personal. That you work with the vocabulary. That you kind of make this vocabulary belong to your own group. Okay, and the next step, after you've introduced the vocabulary, after you've worked with the words, after you've kind of you've asked your students to play with the vocabulary, write it down in creative groups, after you've made this kind of like more their own, the next thing you should do is like try to introduce as many exercises based on students' lives as possible. And basically, right now we live in this reality where we have to have classes online. Do you have classes online in your country? Because in Poland, schools started them like obligatory online classes today, and obviously the whole internet crashed down and there were no classes. At university where I work as well, I'll have to start classes on Monday, and in the private school where I work, I'll start working with online classes on Monday too, and quite a number of my friends, have been quite worried about that. They say like, oh, new classes, new activities, I don't know how to do that, and I said something like that. You know what? I think we language teachers are in a very fortunate position, very fortunate situation, because basically we teach communication, we teach people how to talk. So we can introduce some grammar, but then we can talk about our students' lives, we can talk to them. And this is what I usually do in my classes. I talk to my students, I ask them questions, and I try to be as personal as possible for a few reasons. Reason number one is I create great relationship with my students, and we have great rapport. Reason number two is, when you talk about your own life, you use the vocabulary you actually need. So again, preparing your students for the exam, you're teaching them the words, not like all list of words, but the words that they are going to use when they have to, for example, write an essay about their life, or when they have to write an email to a friend, about what's happening, right? So, let's take a look at how you can do that. Obviously, there are lots of exercises that will ask you for opinion. In Get to 100, the parts that I wrote, I will just I just try to make sure that whatever you do, you finish with some kind of how about you? How about Ukraine? What do you think Ukraine is like? So, and if you take a look here, and at this work in person, answer the questions, you will see that the first question is like like a prophetic. How would you feel about learning online only without going to school and seeing your friends and teachers? I think before that this whole pandemic started, and probably lots of students would have said or said like, yeah, great being at home. Right now, I suppose they want to go back to school and they want to meet their teachers and they want to spend time with them. So as you can see, this is the first thing you do. Whenever you have an exercise, use the possibility to talk about yourself. Even if you have too many exercises, maybe sometimes you should skip one exercise where they just fill in the gaps and give them a chance to use and work with the vocabulary they actually need. Oh yeah, not only students want to come back. I agree. Yeah, I want to come back to work too. I love my work, and I miss it. Okay, but that's not the only way you can make something, some exercises like personal in your students' life. Some vocabulary personal. Now, another idea is you get a piece of paper and you tell your students, why don't you just divide it into 4 different groups, and think about 4 different, let's say, areas of life. Home, school, hobby, and Hogwarts. I like Hogwarts. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and so that's the thing. So you tell your students now, whenever you get some kind of vocabulary that can be personalized, tell your students now, I would like you to take these words, for example, clothes, and put them into categories that they belong to. So for example, which words talking about clothes you'd put in the category home only. I would say, for example, underwear, because if you want to walk around home in underwear only, it's probably only at home. Okay, we shouldn't go to school. I think that would be a very awkward situation to see students in underwear. So the thing is, pajamas. Yes, absolutely, pajamas. So this is what we say. Now, school. Which words belong to school only? Are there any words like that? Okay, and then hobby. The place where you do your hobby. Which words belong only to this place? And then Hogwarts. Imagine you're a student at Hogwarts. Which clothes would you take with you? Imagine you have only one bag. I know that Harry Potter had like magical suitcases and they could take lots of words. But which words would you take if you are going to Hogwarts? And your students make those lists. They write words which belong only to this place or which belong to 2 places. You decide, but you ask your students to make those lists. And then the next step is you ask them to work together. You ask them to work in pairs and first of all tell each other why. But then, usually students who sit together are friends. Usually, they are people who know each other. And, they've been together for like, 10 or 11 years sometimes in the same class, I hope. So, they know quite a lot about their lives. So, we could have one student who talks to another student and says, what, right now, I'd like you to just say why these words don't belong to a certain category. So if somebody says jeans, like puts them in home, their friend can say, well, I think at home you wear tracksuit a lot. I think you wear jeans for school, so it belongs to a different category. Okay, so the idea is that you give your students a chance to manipulate other people's lists, because I know you, and they discuss, they agree or disagree. Again, the point is their discussion. The point is personalizing the words, thinking about their own lives. Because when they come to the exam, when they have to say something, when they have to write something, they'll probably talk about themselves. And they will have to use these words. Now, one more idea for personalizing vocabulary. And the idea that I call is like my story. And again, whenever you introduce vocabulary, and you can do that with most sets of vocabulary, this can be clothes, this can be food, this can be sports, this can be travel, anything. Seriously, anything. Whenever you have this kind of idea with the students, at the end of the class, you can ask them, now, look at the words, pick 5 words, 3 words, 7 words, depends on what you think your students can handle. And you tell them, and now use these words to talk about your story. So like my life, my story, and then you have to use these words. You choose the words, just have 2 minutes, tell each other. You can start the next class with asking students not to tell their story, but the friend's story. And probably they will go like, I don't remember. It's like, and then you ask people to have a discussion, and next time maybe they'll take some notes, they'll write some words. But the idea again is, when you have like this 1 or 2 minutes at the end, even after your students have packed, when they're kind of like waiting for the end of the class, you say, okay, now can you please talk to each other, tell each other, your story about your life, but you have to use 5 of these words. So being personal, again, using this vocabulary. And again, think about the preparation. You don't need to prepare anything. You just open the book, you open Get to 100, you ask your students, look at these words, pick 3 or 4 or 5 or 7 words, and then you talk about your life. Then one final thing, there's personalizing your students' revision. And here, I'd like to have an idea that I picked up. Okay, I stole it. Fine. I stole it from one of the authors of the book, Marta Rosińska. She talked at a conference about that, and I loved it so much. So I stole it from her. Now, this is kind of a personalized revision. Sometimes we use. We ask our students to revise vocabulary. Sometimes we use our students to learn the words, or we give them the words to revise, and they say, but I know these words. Okay, so instead of that, you could do the following thing with your students. At the end of the class, you ask them to divide a piece of paper into, let's say, you can see 8 squares. It can be 12, 15, 20, depends on how many words you'd like your students to revise. You do that, and then each student has 2 different sets. And then let's say student A writes down all the words from this, like worried, nervous, embarrassed, bad mood, bored, exhausted, and upset here, but they have to find the Ukrainian equivalents. So what they come up with, student A, is going to be something like that. Yep. Sturbovanny, is it the right word? Sturbovanny? Okay, thank you. So they have like this list, and then student B has like this empty list of words, and the student A goes sturbovanny, and the other one says worried. Okay, so they remember, they write this down. Then they say znervovanny as like nervous. You write this down, and then they say, it's a difficult one, zbiętiezienny. I'm sorry, forgive me if I say something crazy. If they say, if they give this word, and the other person says, I don't know, I don't know what this word is. Say, okay, you write this down in Ukrainian, because you don't remember this word, and then you give them the actual word. And then you work like that with a piece of paper. After that, you either keep the piece of paper, but with our students, you tell them to keep a piece of paper, and what's going to happen. It's going to disappear, and it will be the no more, right? So with our students, probably you have to just like take a look and say, okay, fine. Maybe do your students have like mobile phones all the time with them everywhere they go? Yeah, okay, obviously. So you tell your students, now take out your mobile phone and take a picture of that piece of paper. And then when the next class comes, those students, students working in person, they exchange the mobile phones with the picture. And, the student, like the friend, will ask them not about the words they knew, because they knew the word worried and nervous and bored and upset and confused, but they will ask them about those other words, like виснаженный. Right? And it's like, and the other person, oh, okay, fine. I'm sorry, I reacted to one of the comments. Very funny. Виснаженный. And it's like, okay, so, and they have to remember the words. So, you have a personalized revision. You revise the words, not all the words, but only the words you didn't remember or you didn't know. Okay, and you can do it like many times. You can ask your students to go to the picture from like 2 weeks ago, from a month ago, because they will have those photos. And this is how it's going to work with your students. They will basically learn. They will basically revise this vocabulary. Okay. Now, so what I have been trying to talk to you about today is like I've been trying to convince you, or maybe just remind you of the fact that, we learn best when we get emotionally involved. When we have vocabulary that we treat as ours, that we have vocabulary that basically is part of our lives. And this is one thing. Another thing is we remember things best. I hope you remember these levels of processing theory. Remember things best when we get involved into the meaning, when we work with the meaning, when we put things in a certain context, instead of just like having a list of words and basically learning it like one by one, repeating again and again and again. And I believe that, at any level of our work, we can personalize the vocabulary we teach to our students to make our students more emotionally involved. And at any level, the level when we introduce the words, when you practice it in drills, when we talk about the lines, and even when we revise the vocabulary, we can do it like in every class. And I believe this should be our approach in our life. Before I finish, probably the best thing you can hear, right? When people say, before I finish, this is like the end of this webinar. Before I finish, I'd like to say one thing, okay? People, stay at home, be safe. The whole thing that we're dealing with, in Poland, in Ukraine, the whole world, is something not connected with grammar, not connected with vocabulary. It's connected with human lives. So stay at home the way I am at home. I have a chance to meet you. I hope one day I may come to Ukraine. I was actually going to, but because of this pandemic, I can't visit your beautiful country, but I'm hoping to in the future. But stay at home and be safe. And if you like this webinar, this is my Facebook. Actually, the other guy is my friend. We work together a lot. You may have met Czesław. He was in Ukraine a few months back. So if you like this webinar, you can go. You can leave some notes. You can leave a review and say that you enjoyed that. So thank you very much. That was fun. That was lots of pleasure. And, it was nice to read all those comments. It was difficult because sometimes your comments were funny. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you one day in the future. Yeah, be safe, stay at home. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Yes, bye. Thank you so much.
Now, Jack, over to you.
Yes. Okay, so thank you so much for such a very useful and practical seminar. I tried to use both my hands to write that difficult word, actually. Well, it was fun. Thank you. Хочу додати, що видавництво Macmillan завжди піклувалося і продовжує піклуватися за вас, шановні колеги. Тож для зручної роботи Macmillan пропонує онлайн-ресурс, зараз ви його бачите в себе на екранах, і також наголошую, що цей ресурс допоможе вам чітко та правильно організувати ваші уроки онлайн, які кожен намагається зараз розпочати для себе щось нове. Та також хочу додати, що після нашого семінару всі учасники отримають лист із сертифікатом та анкетою, яку саме ви вказали при реєстрації на наш вебінар. Також вже були такі випадки, тож перевіряйте час від часу спам. Та також ми пропонуємо вам заповнити анкету, надіслати її на адресу, яку ви бачите зараз на екрані, та всі учасники, які відішлють анкету, отримують матеріали, практичний матеріал, який ви можете використати під час онлайн-уроків з вашими учнями. Тож, наголошую ще раз, що сертифікати отримають всі на протязі 2-3 днів. І я теж зичу вам здоров'я. Stay safe and stay at home. Macmillan loves you. So, до побачення, на все добре і до нашого наступного вебінару.